Yes, I mean, the first thing to say is that I'm sure all of us have been activating against first-party data for a long time. It's just that we're now thinking about it first and foremost, and we'd like to encourage more briefs to come in that are based on it. So yes, we are having more conversations and more briefs, but I think it's like anything in that there are sort of early adopting advertisers and agencies, some of whom are really sophisticated in their thinking, and their questions and their briefs are kind of pushing us to develop our products more quickly and to be more innovative. And then at the other end of the scale, there are some who, you know, are almost like all of this is not going to happen, and nothing's changing, and you feel as though they'll be sort of clinging on to an old way of doing something for a long time until you know, the portcullis comes down. I think what we're trying to do now is to go out more proactively. So we do see a shift in the briefs that are coming in, but we're trying to be very specific about the best use cases for our first party data, and activating with our advertisers' first party data as well, and go out and build sort of tangible use cases with those early adopting clients that then we can share with the commercial organisation, and that we can take out and start sort of putting some real evidence in front of those advertisers that are sort of the next wave, that are teetering but aren't maybe quite briefing us in that wave yet. The other thing that we'd love to see is understanding the strategy and the business outcome that advertisers are looking for, rather than receiving briefs that have already decided what the solution should be. So if we can really get under the skin of what the advertiser is trying to achieve, what the best business outcome is, it's not clicks, that's just a proxy. We talk about attention metrics and engagement now instead anyway. But it's that, you know, what does the business need to achieve, and then how can we help facilitate that through the use of our first party data, rather than just sort of answering a more traditional campaign brief.
Is there a theme with regards to these early adopters? Do you see a specific vertical kind of picking up on these innovations a bit earlier than others, or is this just you happen to have really good relationships with some agencies or advertisers that are willing to take a punt?
I think there are some of the certain people at some of the holding groups for agencies who are really advanced in their thinking, and I think we're sort of helping each other to develop that first sort of wave of products. And then in client verticals, there are some in every vertical who are either ready to start testing now, or who want to have conversations with us about sort of how they can start getting set up. I suppose it's natural that the verticals, the industries that have more of their own customer data are, you know, kind of ready to go and are ready to sort of think about this. But on the other hand, I could name clients that maybe don't traditionally hold a lot of, you know, their own customer data, but are really engaged in sort of thinking about how they can start working in this new world now. So yeah, I won't name a vertical, but there are some, I think, when we start publishing case studies, that you'll see you've got to skew to more towards maybe the business and tech side of business than others.
Yeah. Lucy, do you have any thoughts on that with regards to you know, identifying specific agencies that you can work with to try and kind of push the boat out of bed on first party data?
Not really. I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask on this, as our business model's always really been quite heavily reliant on first party data, so we've not seen too much of a shift in terms of what we're being asked for, because everyone really is coming for the most part to buy our audience, which we obviously collect when they subscribe. We're actually seeing more of a shift of people pushing the boundaries around like, I guess, engagement requests and viewability and things like that. So that's where we're seeing more, but I think it's just because this is really where we've always operated in the first party data space.
Chris, you have kind of more of a one-to-one traditional kind of sales process, less programmatic and more kind of direct sell. Is that are you seeing any concerns with regards to first party data? Do you think there needs to be some sort of adoption there?
I don't have specific concerns. I mean, I was going to say that, yeah, we do have quite a direct sales relationship with a lot of our advertisers. Again, in the US, there's a lot more data buying, targeted segments, and the US being a population of 150 plus million people means that segmentation and targeting is a lot more critical when you're trying to find those those people than some of the smaller markets where you can be more comfortable with specific topic areas or whatever else. But even within, our European clients, some of them are super data savvy and come to us asking for data sharing arrangements and various things. Others are still asking for the basics, and that seems to serve them well still. So it's a real mixed ecosystem at the moment of people.
Joe, have you seen any kind of uplift in requests for first party data through your RFP process?
Very similar to Karen, actually. We have seen an increase. It's within selected client and agency groups. But I thought maybe a slightly different point I just wanted to make was what would be good, and we might be addressing this later, is be good to avoid what happened with GDPR or what has happened with the ICO investigation into real-time bidding, and to try and proactively push the value of first-party data so that we can accelerate that process a little bit. Because what I'd hate to see is that those advertising agencies and the clients that are still sort of relying on third-party data, because obviously it's still working well, sort of leaving it to the last minute, and as an industry suddenly the deadline overtakes us and we're like, oh, what are we going to do now, so not everybody's ready. So I think we need to be quite proactive and pushing clients and agencies who perhaps aren't already on that accelerated path, just to try and get them there a little bit quicker, just to avoid any of the angst and uncertainty that's going to happen in 18 months time.
So you envision kind of the clock ticking, and in 18 months time the change happens and no one's quite prepared for it. So it's a bit of a scramble to figure out what to do. How do you think we can start to approach that, as kind of a collective group of publishers? How do we make sure that we're pushing that message to ensure that we're not doing this last minute scramble?
Is that back to me?
If you have a great answer for it.
It's
a tough one, I think.
But I've got an answer. I think as a group of publishers, particularly in digital, we've collaborated more now than we've ever done in the past. And whether compliance has made us do that, or whether we're just a more collaborative group, I think that we've got a real opportunity to do that. And it's all about not wanting to sound patronising in any way, shape or form, because some clients and agents have really sophisticated ways of using data. Is just an education and training program, and that happens internally within our own businesses, because in news environments in particular, it's so fast paced, and you want to make the target for the day, the week, the month. It's to get people to stick their heads up and just think about the landscape for a moment. So I think education and training, the case studies that Karen's talking about, actually I think will benefit the whole industry when they start coming out, because it's just going to be an indication of how well it can work. The only concern I've got is scale, and that's where the collaboration is really going to have to take root, because I think we've got the trust, we've got the sophistication, we just need to get over the scale hurdle, which I'm sure will come. Yeah.
Karen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I as usual.
Nodding frantically.
Yeah, absolutely. You can hear me. I had to mute myself for a second there because I thought my 7-year-old was going to come and answer a question for me, but I think she's going to forget.
She's more than welcome to.
I might say something that makes more sense than I do. I think it's just this thing again of advertisers talking to us, and we would share those concerns about scale, and also understand some of the concerns that advertisers and agencies have shared about that publishers will have verified logins, we will have richness of first party data, but there's a concern about creating this sort of myriad of mini walled gardens, all of whom are very valuable, but it still presents advertisers with this difficulty of kind of how to measure and track the value of their investment across publishers. So I think if we could see briefs coming in to address some of those issues where an advertiser might say, look, we want to work with the Telegraph and ESI and the FT, how would you go about solving this for us in a first party data world? And obviously we're part of the Ozone project as well. So, that presents a solution, but there are also other solutions that we can talk to specific publishers who may be within Ozone or outside, where we can start to work with an advertiser and figure out, this is how we would deliver that. This is how, we might be able to do anonymized data, kind of matching, for example, across a small group of publishers with an advertiser, and then see how we can activate with it. So that there's a lot we can do if I think clients talk to us, and there's a real willingness there from publishers to speak to each other and to collaborate for the greater good. I don't think we see each other as a competitor set really anymore.
Okay, that's fair. Lucy, do you have any comments to add there?
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think that there is some low-hanging fruit. I think that we can work towards, like if we can all, as an industry, try and move away from metrics like clicks and try and get more into the more holistic attention metrics, brand uplift, things like that. And that is to starts to shift the conversation. Did you have anything good to say, Karen? But yeah, it starts to shift the conversation away from the kind of metrics people were working to before, and that conversation around attribution. But for marketers, I guess it is difficult in that they do want to try and prove value, and they can do that in kind of big, high-scale walled garden environments like Facebook, whereas in a single publisher, you can't really prove that very well. So I do think there's a place where we could all come together and try and move it forward a little bit and allow us to then compete with the kind of bigger players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned metrics, and in fact you've all mentioned metrics at some point. I think we've had a question come through on that. You slightly answered it there, but what kind of metrics are agencies asking for if you're talking about attention and engagement metrics? You mentioned brand uplift, but what else are agencies asking for at the moment? What visibility do they need?
Sorry, do you want to go?
No, go Lucy. I'll go after you.
We're getting a lot more of people pushing for to go beyond the standard viewability metrics. So we're seeing more and more the kind of like people want more than just kind of like the half an ad in view for a second, and we're seeing a lot of that. And I think that's a good start, and it's something that we're trying to work towards and try and find ways that we can move that on. So that's what we're seeing a lot more, and it kind of suits the FT's business model.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think I've got a rule that I don't go on a panel without mentioning metrics that matter, so I have to do that now. Okay, I'm on my own again now. So we launched a programme called Metrics That Matter in the autumn. We started talking about it probably around this time last year. And that was all about the fact that our testing and data showed us that subscribers, really engaged audiences, the click-through rates and the click-out rates are nothing like you would see if you just bombarded, smattered too much advertising all over the open layer. And when we started about, really looking at understanding what made a campaign effective, there wasn't a lot of correlation, and it was really about attention metrics, so kind of scroll depth, having maybe one ad on an article that was a fairly long read, but that ad being relevant, the targeting being good, the creative being beautiful, it's sitting in the right sort of design on the page. And so we launched Metrics That Matter to sort of take on CTR as a ubiquitous measurement, for publishers. We thought we'd meet quite a lot of resistance to start with, but within 2 weeks we had 50 campaigns that were live with Metrics That Matter, measuring attention metrics in Moat. And we had clients calling us specifically up-weighting campaigns so they could take advantage of it. And we now tie that in with brand metric studies as well for campaigns over a certain volume, so that we can show brand awareness, consideration, other brand measurements, and correlate that back to attention. So how has consideration changed when you push levers on scroll depth or on hover rate? And what we want to do is get to a point where we can measure business outcomes and optimize based on attention metrics there too. So it felt as though we were changing a conversation we didn't know if anybody wanted to have, but actually what it feels like in retrospect is it was just the right time to have that conversation. Everybody else was thinking along the same lines. And it does mean that we can start really valuing sort of the premium publisher environment and pulling it away from the value of the scroll and clicks. Really a very different environment to what any of us are doing.
Yeah, it's comforting to know that you're on the same page as everybody else, which is great. Chris, I thank you for that. I'm interested just to hear your perspective on just specific to this whole kind of industry change. We talked about that, you know, potentially having to waiting until the change happens and everybody scrambles. It sounds to me from what we've discussed that there's kind of an internal shift that needs to happen, some education, and then very much a kind of collaboration between everybody for an external push. Do you have any thoughts or kind of wisdom on how we could approach this?
No pressure then.
Just the big question for you, Chris. Sorry.
Just wisdom and a big answer. Where would I start on this? I think the first thing is our sales teams are used to selling certain packages in certain ways, and one of the things that we've got to do is make sure that we're comfortable with the new things that we want to take to market, and then train our sales team such that they're comfortable with the conversations they need to have. And I think this is a shift. You know, the current landscape has bedded in maybe a bit too comfortably over the last few years. That means it's going to take a mindset shift in a way to change the conversation to first party data and to some of the new things new approaches that brands like ours, and I mean that in a panel sense, not Condé brands, are going to want to talk about and have conversations about selling to clients. So I think it does start first up internally, so that our sales teams understand the changes and what that means. You know, what happens if they can't sell some of the things they currently sell today? You know, what are they going to do differently? What are they going to think about differently? But equally, I think we need to go on the journey with our advertising partners and explore what these impacts mean for them and how we can partner with them to, you know, as Karen and Joe said earlier, is how do we partner with them to solve their messaging challenges, their marketing challenges, rather than just have this transactional brief relationship that, you know, is not going to work in the same way anymore.
Yeah. It's quite a movement, isn't it? It feels like there's a lot to be done, but I do think the more conversations we have around this, the more I think we're beginning to realise we're actually all on the same page and we all have the right intentions.